So, welcome to the first episode of The Harsher Reality. And today, to discuss artificial intelligence implications and kind of what's going on, I've got with me a computer scientist, tinkerer, and I'd say general knower of things, Lorenzo Bolla, my good friend. Thank you for taking the time to join today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome.
Pleasure.
So, Lorenzo, are we seeing a genuine step change in AI and everything we're hearing, or is it kind of just hype? And if it isn't hype, maybe would you be able to sort of explain what enabled it?
Yeah, um, the recent advances in AI made the news, right? And it's unclear, as usual, if how much of that is hype and how much is actual. It's actually a revolution, as a lot of people claim to be. There've been like uh, fairly big names kind of weighing in on the problem.
Yeah.
There was a recent letter claiming to asking, this research to stop for a while because of problems with AI. But AI is not like a new topic, is it? It's like started 70 years ago in the 50s, right after the Second World War. And in fact, one of the first applications of the proto-computers was like trying to kind of figure out how intelligence works, how people reason. And then from then on, the last 70 years, there have been steady progresses, but never did AI reach the level of popularity that it has today. There was, in fact, like the golden age, like the 80s, when people were so like excited about technology and stuff that AI, people would think that AI would solve all the problems. But after that golden age, basically that expectations were not satisfied, were not fulfilled,
So the
and probably
80s,
were not,
the
were
golden
not
age was
technically
the
ready.
80s, you're saying. So there was
Yeah, I think so. I think the age of the optimism, broadly speaking,
okay, interesting.
where technology would solve all our problems uh, in like a decade of richness, and
I see.
like everything's booming. And so uh, but the yeah, they never, I mean, around that time, in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, then because these expectations are not really fulfilled, and there was like sort of a setback. So I remember when I started working on computer science as like student first and a professional, it became kind of like a joke. Nobody was believing it, and then
And when was this? This was what, the early...
I would say 90s and 2000s, something
Okay,
like that.
okay.
At the end of the 90s, so I think it was 97, if my memory serves, there was that piece of popular culture where when um, um, when a computer DeepMind, I think it was called, won against Kasparov in chess, so
Yes.
that made the news, right?
Yeah.
But then everybody was very quick to say, yeah, whatever, that's just a very narrow task.
Yeah.
And so kind of the buzz went away very, very quickly. People
Yeah.
said, okay, chess is broken, it's not fun anymore. Computers will, whatever, win every time. So nobody would stop playing chess. Actually, it's funny because the opposite happened. From then on, chess all of a sudden became very popular. Now it's super popular. People make a lot of money playing chess online. And I think that actually related, the having a computer that can teach you
Yeah.
so play chess so well sort of opened it up to everyone, right? Everyone can learn from it, and
And it probably accelerated the development of
yeah,
players
exactly.
in some sense.
So the effect was actually there. But the hype now, if we come closer and closer from the 2000s, Yeah, so the biggest advances since then have been sort of under the radar.
Okay.
And the company did work on AI. And so you got slowly all the recommendation systems working on, proposing you stuff that are tailored to your kind of inclinations as a user online. Um, we got self-driving cars about 5 years ago. That is a pretty hard problem. It's quite a big milestone. Yeah, and then now in 2023, let's say, although 2022, even 2021, I think it was the beginning of like large language models being
Yeah.
kind of made public and people could actually use them.
Yeah.
And GPT-2 was 21, GPT-3, 22. Now we're gonna have GPT-4, 23. I
So
mean,
what you're describing is kind of the past, let's say 5-10 years, is a steady increase in the performance.
yes, exactly.
A
Yeah,
steady
I
increase in the
think it was
performance.
steady increase with a few setbacks and
Yeah.
roadblocks, along the road. But
And
yeah,
now, obviously, there's all this excitement. Is that because we've reached a certain, I mean, maybe you can explain it, a tipping point, or is it just, it's reached, steady improvements have led to a point, and that point that is sort of, it's a natural progression, and we've reached a place rather
yeah,
than we've reached a place that is a fundamental tipping point? How do you think about it?
yeah, yeah. That's tricky, right? And
Sure.
I don't think there is like a general answer, but I think in certain area of knowledge, like chess, say,
Yeah.
we reached that tipping point long ago, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
already machines are way better. I think what's different now is that, oh, incidentally, if I just drop there another comment, is you don't really need like a qualitative change in things. Sometimes changing the quantity is enough to make the process kind of change qualitatively too. So if you do something, uh, let's say bad, right?
Yeah.
Or you do it slowly,
Yes.
nobody cares, nobody's interested. If you keep, continue doing it and you do it many times, or you do it faster,
Yes.
you reach a point where you're not doing anything substantially different, but you're doing it in a way that nobody else can. And at that point, you're qualitatively different. You're something else, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening. That like AI is not doing. There've been, that's not totally true. There've been advances like theoretical advances, but at the end of the day, computers are doing what they're good at. But they reached a point where, for language models in particular, for that application, they reached a point where they have an ability that people recognize as sort of similar to theirs.
Yeah.
And large language models, effectively, if there are computer programs that play chess and they broke chess, large language models are play with language, right? And in a sense, they broke language. In a sense that they can play the game of language with people in a way that's similar to how they play the game of chess.
Understood.
You know what I'm saying? So, and the fact is that all our society is based on language. That's our software, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a sense.
And so, yeah, so that's
So,
what probably
so,
makes,
so with
yeah.
large language models and ChatGPT, and in simple terms, what is it useful to sort of, can we say what a large language model is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, um, so you can think of a large language model as a predictor
Okay.
of words. And so it takes as input a string of words or sequence of words,
Yeah.
and it predicts, which predict here means it gives you as an output a word that is most likely to follow your input words.
Got it.
and the likelihood there is according to a certain corpus of language that it was trained on. And so the current language models have been trained on a lot of text that is available freely on the internet, Wikipedia and IMDb, whatever, all the websites that we know. And you can prompt them, right? So like ask them a question, or just give them as an input a sequence of words, and the language model will basically look up what is the most likely word that follows, right? And start an answer. So therefore, starting to give you an answer, and then repeat this process
For each word,
each
sort of
word, right?
iterate
And
what is going to
growing
be.
kind of an answer to your question, for example.
Yeah.
And the answer, the funny thing is, I mean, the answer, if the training, suppose the training has been done, correctly and with enough data and so on, the answer is going to be plausible because it follows all the rules that has been learned by the model. The problem is it going to be truthful? Is it going to be sensible? And so, yeah,
we'll come back to truthful.
We'll come back to that
later.
Yeah,
come back to that later.
Yeah, but it certainly is going to be plausible. So it's something that, let's say, follows some sort of rules implicit in the language.
And to your point before, where you talked about, if you do something faster or more with more intensity or with more power, you can reach a point where it's ultimately qualitatively different. So I, through my sort of explorations, and obviously I'm not a technical person, I was sort of led to understand that with ChatGPT, one of the things that enabled it is, as you're saying, the sheer volume of data that it's been trained on. So let's if X is the technical capability, the algorithm, let's say, rather than massive improvements in that, and Y is the input of data, it's just the sheer volume that's allowed it to do its pattern recognition magic or whatever. Is that accurate representation?
No, that's exactly true. It's the language models are, again, not a new concept, but they have been tweaked, and new even theoretical breakthrough happened in the past 5-10 years. But more than so, I would think that the amount of data on which they're trained is increased. There's a lot of data freely available, text freely available. Since until recently, we didn't have the hardware to train machines and crunch this number. So there were like kind of engineering advances,
as well.
TPUs, GPUs, farm to like software, like hardware farms to kind of crunch these numbers, train this data.
So it's not entirely accurate to say that, it's the volume of data, because to process, obviously, if having the volume is one thing, but if you don't have the hardware to
processing power,
process it, so that's
right.
I don't know how to assign weights to these things, but
I mean,
probably
Wikipedia
equally important, probably.
Totally, yeah, totally. I mean, Wikipedia has been around for a lot of years, many more than language models. But but the TPUs and GPUs are fairly recent, and even then, only recently, in the last 5 years, maybe, there have been like advances in the algorithm design that allowed this processing to happen in parallel on these TPUs and GPUs. Before then, the training was much slower. Right, it would take forever to train the models.
Okay.
The important thing to know, though, is that once a model is trained, that's it. It's like a sculpture. It's like a piece of rock that you chiseled, you modified it by training, and it's got a shape. That's the shape. It's like a prisma, crystal. and then you fire a light through, asking a question, and the crystal sort of gives you an answer, spits out something, but it doesn't change.
It doesn't
That's
change,
important.
so it's not
No.
in its current form. So this might
Yeah.
be relevant for a couple of questions later, to understand what it is and how it relates to humans and etc. So what you're saying is once an LLM is trained, there's no continuous development. It's not like you can press a button and say, well, okay, you were trained up to all the data available yesterday. In 1 month, we are going to press this button and you're going to assimilate and absorb the new stuff from the last month. That's not, at the moment, it's not possible. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. That's going to change very, very, very quickly.
So they will come up with it, most likely. Okay, I see.
Yeah. So, but ideally, that is just saying that the training is a very expensive operation.
I see.
To do on a model in the terms of computing power and time, and like millions of dollars, literally. Whereas using the model, once it's been trained, is very cheap. Everybody can log into openai.com and just query the model. Moreover, once the model has been trained, and that's another advance that's quite recent. Once you have they say it's a raw model. It can be fine-tuned. Okay. You can take a raw model, fine-tune it with a very relatively small corpus of text. It could be your notes from university, say, so a small note, corpus, that stuff you wrote, and the model, quite surprisingly, becomes really good at mimicking your. Well, I can find the word. Let's say mimicking your notes.
Mimicking your notes, I see. Okay, because it's
what I'm
able to
saying?
absorb that pattern or see the pattern in the new text and absorb that into
It can be adapted very cheaply. Once it's trained, it can be adapted very cheaply to different. So you can train it on the style of Dostoevsky, say. It's supposing that's not been trained already with all that Dostoevsky. It's
I'm sure someone's done.
Right. And but you can tweak it and so make it kind of personal and very easily make it a product, say, to sell.
Because that's quite interesting because, obviously this naturally leads on to kind of implications, and it's probably now is a good time to introduce the question of implications. And I guess implication is very broad. I mean, it affects different things in different ways. But to go off what you just said, I can see, for me personally, as a not very technical person, if there was, if this were to be available, such a thing where I can feed in a corpus of text that I find interesting or a field I'm interested in, and then use that to find certain patterns or as something to bounce off ideas, even to me, that could be very interesting, because who knows what it's going to throw out, a pattern maybe we hadn't observed before, an idea, or anything, right? So if that is a potential use case for an everyday user, it sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think so. There are definitely very good, very positive applications, and that's why people get excited and companies get excited. And that the one you mentioned is certainly one. Just being having.
Sorry, say that again. I missed that.
The one you mentioned is certainly one. It's very good, like being able to use an AI to sort of find patterns in a field that you're interested in for research or whatever. And another one that I'm pretty excited about would be for training. Like if I want to learn to play piano or learn to speak German, an AI could have a dialogue with me, right? Like in German, for example, which is the easiest example. You could have this thing that learns your kind of weak points and trains you on those weak points, for example. And it's a lesson that's tailored on you. It's like the perfect teacher. And that obviously people have done this, okay? There are AI trainers that do this, and people who tried it report that it's like the most empathic experience, weirdly enough. And so, which is kind of odd, if you ask me.
Well, it is kind of odd because
Yeah.
sort of this is one of the things they talk about implications, and when you said empathic, the people report the empathic experience. This is kind of the question of the Turing test being passed. Have we created machines in our own image, or have we ourselves become more like machines, so we can't recognize the difference anymore?
Yeah, but the story when the big companies want to make money nowadays, they try to predict your behavior, right?
Yeah.
Because they want, for example, to sell you advertising, and so they want to predict what you're going to buy next, so that they can bombard you with advertising. To do that, they create models and of you and follow you around online and so on. That's all normal knowledge. People do this. But if you think about it, the best way to predict your behavior is to condition you, right?
Sure, of course.
Right. If you right. So, and that's in a sense what a lot of these platforms, I speak very generically, but a lot of websites do this consciously or not. They give you only a certain amount of tools and a certain means to communicate. For example, say Facebook or Zoom that we're using, we are forced to use a certain media and a certain tools that we are given. And in a sense, we are constricted and restricted in what we can do, and so we're more predictable, right? And these are, we do this. I mean, companies do this all the time.
And so now that we have these sort of more advanced algorithms, let's call it, which which use artificial intelligence, what in your mind are the implications for what you just mentioned, the conditioning, the restricting? How do you see that going forward?
It's hard to tell. At the moment, there are no applications yet of AI which has been pervasive enough, I think, to see where we're going. One can only guess, right?
Sure.
It's hard to guess. It's quite hard to guess in this case. I think because I really do believe this is like one of those paradigm shifts where there's a new technology, a new kind of groundbreaking technology. Similarly to, in my lifetime, I remember mobile phones, for example, right? And I do remember clearly, even before mobile phones, some genius wanted to do video calls, and that thought just went away. It didn't even pick up. And now everybody, after a few years, at the time, many years ago, it didn't work because people didn't want to show their face on video while having a phone call. And they would say, oh shit, no way I'm going to show my face. I just want to make a quick phone call. And today everybody is actually sharing the screen of themselves, videos and stuff, and having this conversation face to face. And what changed? It just changed. People got used to it. They found it useful. And so if you ask me many years ago, I've never guessed that video calls and mobile phones, for that matter, came along. And who would have thought that they would become so central to our lifetime, and they change society effectively, right? Impossible to guess, really. So will it happen with these AI tools? Maybe. The thing is that there are risks obviously involved, and the benefits also involved. But I think there is a disequilibrium between risks and benefits, because
Go on.
you can, and then like generally speaking, you can have something that makes you extremely rich, or have a little chance of killing you.
Sure.
But at what point do you draw the line?
Yeah.
And as you scale this up to society, there is something that can make society really, really happy, let's say, cure cancer, make everybody super rich, but has got a little chance of destroying society altogether.
So if I understand you, what you're saying is that the disequilibrium is, how would you characterize it? So are you saying that?
Yeah, the disequilibrium is that there's no limit to how rich you can be, right?
Yeah.
But there is a limit once you're dead. You see what I'm saying? Like, you cannot die many, many times, right?
And are you saying
once you're
that?
dead, you're dead.
Are you saying that this is creating? You see the potential for some kind of systemic downside, like an existential risk?
Yeah, I think I'm saying that it may become a very dangerous kind of game to play, like a bet to take, if if this technology is so powerful as people think and dream it can be.
Yes.
It can also be a very dangerous one, right? Like everything, it can be misused, it can be misunderstood, and so like nuclear power, another example, like super interesting technology that could, in theory, give us a vast amount of energy.
Yes.
But it's got problems, right? It's got technology problems. It's got problems with the environmentally speaking.
This is very interesting
so
because obviously with complex systems, a complex system being, in simple terms, something with many interacting, where the parts have interrelationships, where it's and they work together, where it's difficult to predict, the next step, or it's very difficult to predict so far ahead. And and obviously society is a complex system, right, at its core. And then what you're saying is, if you have something with extraordinary power, like artificial intelligence algorithms that are embedded in society, it could lead to, we don't know what it is, but it could lead to some kind of existential risk. So that sort of, in theory, by the way, I agree, and it makes sense in theory, because fundamentally complex systems are things are unknowable, right? And so we have to be careful. And then I guess someone challenging would say, "Oh, okay, but I mean, it's difficult because fundamentally things are unknowable, right? In a sense, but what? So what is like what if you had to throw out one fear, Lorenzo, as a computer scientist, someone who's been in the field for 20 years? Something like that.
I wish so.
Shortly.
Probably more.
More. Okay. Wow. Okay. So someone who's been in the field for more than 20 years, and you talk about these risks. Okay, but give me an example, right? I mean, obviously, I'm with you in a sense that it's hard to give examples, but someone else might say, "But hang on, man, you can't be just talking about risks in the abstract. What are you really worried about?"
So, right. So, if you ask around people or read blogs and videos and stuff, there are all sorts of like the bleak scenarios, or like Terminator, like
Right.
oh my God, the robots are gonna get us, right? And
Yeah.
so there's that.
Okay.
Let's leave that aside.
Okay.
I don't think I don't think it makes any good to the side of the fear in AI kind of camp.
Yeah.
It's a bit too romanticized. But like theoretically speaking, there is a problem with what it's called alignment, right? In literature, where you have this. It basically is the problem of aligning the AI to our, as a human species or society,
Yes.
goals. Okay, because supposing these AIs have goals, which is not exactly true at the moment, but we
Because
can
their
get
goals
back
at
to
the
it.
moment, as I understand it, are the goals we give them, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So the machine does what it's told to do,
Yeah.
right? And
For the most.
so for yeah, not everybody, even my personal AI, which is my son, right? Everybody spawns AIs.
Don't tell
So,
him that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So so it's got machine has got some hardware, it's got some software, and it
yeah,
just
yeah,
plays that software through the hardware. And yeah, surely you can code goals in it,
yeah.
and the machine will follow it. The problem is, um, I think there are two sort of problems in this case. One is how to choose the goal. Okay, so self-driving car has the goal of bring people from point A to point B.
Yeah, yeah.
Presumably, you'll make it a goal as as fully fledged as possible, as they described. You want to go from A to B, but you don't want to have an accident.
I mean,
You
you
don't want to
define
get
the goal as
fined.
best you can.
But yeah, exactly. Define it as best as you can. The problem is that um, it's basically impossible to do that effectively. There are um, for a thing, if you think of like a super clever AI, which is much clever than you, okay, let's do, yeah, so let's imagine this scenario where you have an AI which is so intelligent, it's a narrow field, even you don't need to have a general intelligent AI for this. You give it a goal which you think covers all the angles and all the sides of the problems for a self-driving car. You put all the caveats in there,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's so intelligent that will escape this kind of cage of rules that you define, because it will think of something you have not thought of, unless you have a mathematical proof
I
that you
see.
are,
Okay.
right? It will
Okay.
find a way or explore some area, some space.
And what would that mean? What would that
So that's
mean
one
then
problem.
in
Yeah.
real terms? So if you, since you're beyond the example of self-driving cars, what would that mean? So a deviation from, rather than going from point A to B, I guess we don't know ultimately, but what are we saying that?
Like, okay, let me play with the Terminator scenario there.
Okay.
So if I have a super intelligent Uber machine,
Yeah.
and it takes it wants to bring you to the airport, okay, it could phone up the nearest hospital and fake an emergency so that an ambulance drives to the place or near the place where you are, and then it follows the ambulance through all the red red traffic lights to get faster. This, by the way, is a scene from a movie. And do find out that possible escamotages to get there
I
faster and not break any
see.
law. Something you never thought of,
I
but
see. I see. So what you're saying is we define the goals as best we can as humans, but because we have this supercharged thing, which ultimately we don't really understand. I mean, the AI's pattern recognition, it's
yeah,
like so someone mentioned to me, it's the way an algorithm figures out what a tree looks like, is not it's not the way humans do, and it has its own mechanism for, is it the pixel, we don't really understand, whatever. So what you're saying is that we can set the goals, but if you have this entity that is kind of an enigma, or a supercharged intelligence or whatever, it can come up with some strange way of achieving the goal,
right.
but that has other adverse consequences.
Yeah. So exactly. So you can't really predict, even if you give it a go, how it will get there. And so it may take all sorts of routes, and you can put safeguards around the
Yeah.
routes that you think are plausible,
Sorry.
but it may deviate from that route through holes in your rules that you didn't think of. And so it may act in an ethical way, or
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
may create suffering somehow down the line, or
Wow.
whatever.
So it's
Um,
incredible. It's so this leads to the question. Obviously, technology. As humans, we make use of technology, right? From all the way from fire
sure.
and tools, and that's
Sure.
what we do, right? And as our species. So how we how do you see as sort of expert in the field? I was going to say, is it possible, but maybe that's too closed of a question. What can we do to make sure that what you're doing doesn't arise? Is it even possible? When
Yeah,
what
that's a
does it
good
look like?
question. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we said at the beginning that big names wrote letters to stop research for a while we figured this out.
Interesting.
When we figured the alignment problem specifically, in general, the various problems that arise with AI, and so even them had to resort to, like, I think the last resource is like stop research for a while, give us more time,
Stop
which is
and
sort
go.
of,
I
it's
mean,
sort of unheard of if you think about it. Like,
unheard of.
unheard of, yeah. I mean, I don't remember anyone say stop developing mobile phones,
Yeah,
right? Quite the opposite, in fact.
yeah,
Well, I mean, it could have been a stunt, like people, just saying, clean their conscience, say, yeah, we are aware of the risks. Look, we did a letter. There we go. We are aware of the risks. In the meantime, let me continue my research as normal.
yeah,
And so it could be a stunt, maybe they don't really believe in the risks, but it's a weird tactic if that's the case.
yeah,
But so I don't know. There are theoretical kind of investigations and research that are focused to solving this alignment problem
yeah,
specifically,
yeah,
and they are along the lines of trying to not give goals to AI at all, and instead forcing the AI to um, refer back to humans every time. So every time it has to do something, you sort of have to check, can I do this? Can I do this? And keep, kind of keep asking and verifying if
yeah.
if what's going to do next is appropriate, let's say. Uh, and so, but besides
Well, that makes a lot of
uh,
sense.
it makes sense. Yes, it makes sense, but it's hard. I mean, I don't know. I'm not
At
so
what
expert
stage,
in
like
this.
how it's then the question is, at what point, how do you define a
Correct.
reference point? At what
Yeah.
point is a task
Exactly.
yeah, at what, how many times, at what
Yeah, and moreover, um, what prevents a machine from manipulating you? Again, no, a machine. Let's not call it a machine, which is
yeah,
reductive. But let some AI to manipulate you. It could come back to you and tell you a half truth, or tell you things in an order so that you say yes.
but this is quite
But it's
interesting.
making maybe steady progresses toward the goal that you don't actually approve.
But this is
Or
very
it,
interesting because that leads to, sorry to jump in, but because isn't there a premise inside what you're saying? Because what you're saying means, at least the way I understand it, that the algorithm, the AI entity has intention, right? If you're saying that the risk is that it will somehow deceive or work towards a different goal than it was set by design rather than by accident, that is somehow the way I understand it, attributing intention to it, unless you mean something different.
No. I get your point, and I don't think you need to attribute intentionality necessarily, but
Okay.
uh, but uh, there's a concept of instrumental goals where you have a final goal, right? Like going from point A to point B
Yes.
as a driving car, and there are instrumental goals, which is do not crash in the meantime, right? Otherwise, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
Or don't get fined by the police that will stop you and you'll be late. And
Yeah.
like if you want to achieve any goal, for example, the basic instrumental goal is don't be switched off as a
Yeah.
machine, right? Otherwise, you'll never get there. And so that is the Skynet scenario, right? Skynet doesn't want to be switched off,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
goal it has, it cannot achieve it otherwise. So
Yes.
first thing it does, it creates copies of itself, so it cannot be switched off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And there are all sorts of instrumental goals that may be really bad, even if the final goal is pretty good. And so you have to consider all the instrumental
And what you're
goals too.
saying is that we can't predict the instrumental goals that may occur to the algorithm.
Yeah.
And that's the black box, right? That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Like one typical example that it's fun to think about is if I have, in fact, it could probably be implemented right now with the technology we have, GPT-4.
Okay.
You ask GPT-4 to make you rich. Okay. So how can I become rich? You ask, and maybe ChatGPT-4 answers, well, I figure you should put ads online and benefit from advertising online, which is what big companies do. Okay, so you continue, right? How do I do that? Okay, you keep asking, and let's say this scenario shows up. It's suggesting you to look what's trending on Instagram. Okay,
Yeah.
so it looks up at Instagram, looks what's trending. Maybe cats are trending nowadays on Instagram. Okay, so
They've been
and
trending for
so
10 years, Lorenzo.
right, yeah, exactly. And so it generates from generative AI, generates pictures of cute cats,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it floods Instagram of picture of cats, even more than now. Okay,
Yeah.
and then because it's trending, they will go viral, and then it puts ads in there, and it does this all this automatically. There's no need for intervention in any of this, and it puts ads in there, and that ads make a lot of money, and you become rich. Okay, so the goal is achieved,
Yeah.
but they broke effectively. They broke Instagram, you know.
Yeah. I see.
So that's an instrumental goal, if you will, some sort of consequence that you may not have thought about, but it's totally plausible.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's a problem. They may flood not just Instagram, but Wikipedia or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or the job hiring process,
Yeah.
whatever, with those sorts of manipulations, and so much so that even any sort of relation between people may become very hard unless it's with trusted people that share your own ideals, and so more and more you will try to be with who you trust and less with who you don't know, because you don't know what this guy says. It may even be an AI for whatever you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I see.
And then things will be more fragmented and blah blah blah, and all the usual problems with society. So that those are the risks, that I see very very real. And with the technology we have, we don't need the Skynet terminators, for any of this. And yeah, so you might be rich in the become rich in the process.
Yeah, you may, but even that is
Yeah,
because
but maybe they
right.
will break the ads industry before that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be good. Yeah.
So one of the things we kind of already touched on, intention, and that is sort of this idea of what does it mean, And there's this concept of AGI that's sort of floating around, artificial general intelligence. I know from our chats that you're sort of interested in it. Could you, before we get into it, could you say in simple terms what sort of the computer science world considers AGI to be? Because it's not entirely clear to me, but maybe we can start with how you see it, and we take it from there.
Yeah, so it's just an AI, so like an intelligent process agent, let's say, that can be applied to multiple problems and tasks and contexts. And so all the AIs we have at the moment are narrow AI.
Yeah.
And a general AGI, it's not narrow, but it's broad. And so it can be applied to chess, it can be applied to math, it can be applied to driving a car. And humans are general, broad in this sense. We can play chess, we can play soccer, we can drive a car and not crash it most of the times. And so, whereas in AI so far, up until today, let's say, the AI we had were good at very narrow tasks. The problem with AGI is that, first of all, there are no theoretical reasons why it could not exist. So it's plausible, at least as a concept. Because some people may say, yeah, whatever, there are unicorns, right? You can think of anything you want. Doesn't mean that they exist.
But the concept being a general ability to do what? Many things rather than...
to solve a problem, let's say. Well, it depends, right? Even for humans, defining intelligence is sort of fuzzy, right?
Because one of the things that sort of occurs to me, I'd be curious to get your thoughts, is that ultimately a human is a particular phenomenon. We are a species, and we have certain abilities, it's called skills, and we have certain way of relating to the world and understanding the world, which includes feelings, emotions, intellect, physical capabilities, in the same way that, let's say, a dog is a particular species with its own consciousness and intelligence and whatever. Like a dog can smell extremely well, right? And you could say that's a kind of intelligence, and we can't. As humans, we can smell some things, but nowhere as near. And that is, it just is, by virtue of it being a particular kind of entity, biological entity. So if I then generalize that to, okay, how do we think about an algorithm? I just see it as an entity, again, let's say, but a technological entity that can do certain things. And we can say maybe that if we map it to human capabilities, maybe some things we would call intellectual, or some people like to think of left brain and right brain. So left brain, computational, analytical problems that can be defined, broken down, and sort of approached that way. But because the algorithm doesn't have a biological body, it's whatever that intelligence is, it's a different thing. So that's sort of how I think of it, as they're just different, and it has, and to compare it to, let's say, some people are, who was it? There's some engineer somewhere thought his algorithm was sentient, and and so I was just really funny. Someone on Twitter replied, I think, saying it's like the guy who goes to the bachelor party and thinks that the stripper is in love with him or something like that. So, it was really funny.
That's pretty good.
So how do you feel about sort of that, the notion of intelligence, and does it even make sense to compare? Does it even make sense to compare it to human?
That's a good question. So that's a very good question. I don't think there is that's comparable. So I think of it as in these terms, there is a space of possible intelligences. And there are many ways in which you can be intelligent. And as you said, dogs are intelligent in a certain way. and we as humans are intelligent in a certain way. And you know, name dropping a famous example, you know, bats, like a legal terms, can have their own internal kind of way of feeling that
Yeah.
we will never be able to remotely phantom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are areas of let's call it intelligence of or conscience that are close to us, right?
Yes.
But they're not close in general. Bats live in that space, and dogs live in the space where you can smell stuff that was there yesterday. They sort of see the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
amazing, right? And so they're possible, and I don't see why an artificial intelligence could not cover those spaces, and in fact find many more. And so it will, according to the Vulgata, they will eventually. I mean, these AIs will eventually explore areas of intelligence that is completely alien to us.
Mm,
So much alien that we can't even recognize it as intelligent.
understood.
And only if you step back and look at, kind of from maybe a further point of view, you can recognize some intelligence there. But um, so there is the problem of recognizing when this thing will be intelligent. But
Yeah.
it may happen, and we may not even realize it, and maybe it's already happening, right? And
Well, it
and
may.
all of a sudden you've got this massive thing that moves around you like a puppet, and you don't even realize that that is the case,
Yeah.
right?
And is it, from your perspective, is it sort of, I sort of think, yes, it can have intelligence and maybe even uncover things or approaches that we can't comprehend.
Yeah,
Um, However, for it to be a dog, or to have the intelligence of a dog, it needs to be a dog. That's sort of how I think
yes,
of it.
exactly,
It needs, but we don't even know. We can't replicate a dog, right? Not yet.
exactly,
Not
correct.
yet,
I,
unless
I
we
agree
clone a
with that.
dog. Yeah. So okay.
I agree with that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're made of meat. You know, dogs are made of meat,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we have some senses,
Stuff.
right? But yeah, and we'll never experience shifting bits around the
Yeah.
network, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's an experience that is close to us,
Yeah.
like a bat.
Yeah.
We don't have a sonar or stuff, something,
So what your
but
point is basically that, it may not, it may not replicate our intelligence or another animal's intelligence,
for
but it
sure,
may have its own special thing,
correct, yeah,
which kind of it's, when you think about it, it's obvious, and then we may not recognize it,
yeah,
or its usefulness, or even its danger,
yeah.
because we can't comprehend it fundamentally because we are not it.
Yeah, yeah, correct. It will never be. Yeah. In fact, the funny, the fun from the disaster AI movie
Yeah,
usually happens when the AI becomes looks like a human, right? Like you have this thing which is uncanny, like
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah, yeah,
feels right. I mean, it looks right, but it doesn't actually feel like human. And so the movie is all about, in fact, it wasn't. It's a Terminator or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If you have an intelligent or AT, the extraterrestrial kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
movie,
yeah,
it kind of looks like you. It's got these big eyes, with tears in it. Yeah, and so it sort of looks like you, so you can relate. But if you have a Roomba that goes around your house, you don't feel anything for Roomba, right? You feel something for a dog because it's part of us. It's kind of
yeah, yeah, there's a
alive, like you. It
relationship.
shares a lot with you. Doesn't You don't feel nothing, I hope, for your laptop, right? you don't Yeah, but anyway,
But I'm with you, I'm with you.
so there are, yeah, I think there may be species of intelligence that we don't recognize as such, but they are indeed intelligent. I mean, then people can say, well, that's not what I mean, or not what I care. Frankly, I do care if there are like overlords that are, or like processes, let's call them processes that
Processes, yeah,
push me around, manipulate me,
100%.
and right? And
We
if they're
already see
intelligent,
that.
have their own motives, then sorry.
We already see that from what you said.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of, you talked about social media platforms and advertising, blah blah blah. So we already have that in a very sort of,
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say in a nascent way, but even that's quite powerful. But a lot of people are hooked on it, and the less aware, less determined individuals can easily get sucked into these things.
Totally, yeah.
Kids as well.
Yeah, and also in a smaller scale, every time people get together, then the individuals sort of disappear and something bigger grows out of an association of people which has its own intent. And if you think about like states or big corporations, if you look at them as individuals, as entities in themselves, they have a very different morals, very different ethics. They don't care about individuals that much,
Sure,
right? And they respond to other logics. And you could say those are intelligent entities. Why not? But and I think AI may bring about other sort of intelligences like this that we don't understand, we can't control. I mean, we do have processes and a long history of building societies, through natural evolution and whatnot, and we still are not able to have a decent society, which is fair for everyone and respects individuals and so on. So we're not very good at that, at like controlling these processes.
Yeah.
And now we're putting more sauce into the pan.
No, this is exactly it. So, I mean, in a sense, humanity has done great things, right? We've arrived here. At the same time, as you're saying, our track record is not glowing per se, right? I mean, we've done a lot, but also, so to put into the mix this. Frankly, it's an enigma, right? Because once it gets beyond, it will become a black box in terms of computational power and the steps involved and what's going on. And when you throw this into what is already a complex system, you are potentially exponentially magnifying the possibilities. And okay, we may be some good possibilities, but if we are also creating existential risk, then
another way to put it is that you have an alignment problem in theory, but we already have it here in society, even without AIs.
Of course.
And we can't seem like our society is not aligned to the interests of all the people. It's probably not even possible. And so you're dropping this thing which is not aligned per se with any goal, and you're dropping it into an unaligned society. So what it's going to do, who knows? I don't know. So it may, such a way that things worse.
Well, hopefully we will be around to to find out. And I'm conscious that we've been talking for over an hour now, and I want to be mindful of your time as well. And thank you, Lorenzo. It's been a great chat, and for taking the time to explain some of the technical details in simpler terms, and also how you see the implications and potential risks. It's been great having you, and
that was good fun. It was a pleasure to chat.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
That's great. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye.